Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Ethics Experts. Thanks for joining us today. If you're a first-time listener, welcome to the show. And if you're a repeat listener or a subscriber, welcome to the show. How are you doing? And that's what you get with the Ethics Experts. If you subscribe, you get an extra welcome at the beginning of every show. So subscribe. I'm your host, Giovanni Gallo, and I'm very excited today to feature and introduce you to Geert Vermeulen. Geert is a CEO of ECMC. He's a well-known professional in the ethics and compliance space. He's an interim ethics and compliance officer and really a great thinker and teacher on all things ethics. Geert, welcome to the show, man.
Yes, thank you for having me.
So I always like to get started with this question just to get us warmed up here. On the Ethics Experts, we like to talk about the personal side of ethics, the part of ethics that impacts people, because that's what it's really about, all about to me. So let's talk about you a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your career and how you came to be involved in ethics.
Yeah, okay, sure. So I think I rolled into the compliance and ethics and compliance profession more like a sort of a coincidence. So this occurred some 20 years ago. I was working at the company where I was working, and I was the quality manager.
Okay.
And we were looking at the implementation of a new data privacy law, so the predecessor of the GDPR.
Mm-hmm.
And so being the quality manager, I knew a thing or two about all the processes and the systems that we were working with. So I also knew quite well where we kept which kind of data, how we obtained it, and where it left the organization. So I was asked to make an inventory of all the data. And so this was, in retrospect, my first compliance project. Though at that time I didn't realize it was it was compliance. So and so the role really started appealing to me a bit later on. So I knew at a given moment, ever since I was very young, I know that I could not stand anything that was unfair. So yeah, so and when I went to university, I didn't really know what I wanted to become, and I thought about becoming a journalist, so I could write about everything that was unfair. But some journalists told me, well, Geert, you better learn a profession first, and then we will teach you how to write. So I went to study economics. With the ambition to invent the Vermeulen economic model that would solve all the poverty in the world. So I'm a bit of an idealist.
I love it.
So, but then let's say one and a half year into my studies, I realized that the economists are not going to solve the poverty problem on their own. So there are too many other factors like institutional factors, political, cultural, sociological. So this challenge is really complicated. So
yeah, it is.
Yeah, but when I started working in compliance, and I started at a given moment, I started implementing financial regulations to ensure that customers would be treated fairly, and especially when I started my first anti-corruption project in 2007, I realized that the essence of an ethics and compliance program is about fighting unfair practices and promoting ethical business. And at that time, I realized, okay, so this is the job for me.
Okay. That's cool. I think that happens to a lot of people that we have on the show and across the profession that, it kind of finds you, right? And a lot of us have this sense of justice, the sense of the way the world should be. And I think we always have to marry that with a pragmatic sense that it's not that way and we have to deal with it. And we have to be honest about where it is and try to do what we can to fix it. I consider myself a bit of an idealist. I have big dreams and I'd love to see a huge impact. But at some point as ethics experts, we got to get into the work and say, okay, well, it's not there. How can I step it forward today, this month, this year?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Cool. Let's talk a little bit more about your career and some of your experiences. I'd love to hear a little bit, maybe one or two moments in your compliance role where you were most personally satisfied with your impact. There's a lot that we do that, we're churning through reports, or we're doing some administrative stuff, or we're working behind the scenes on something. But often we get to see some of that impact, whether it's on an individual person or a whole program. Tell us a little bit about sometimes where you really felt like you were making an impact.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, so maybe what would be a good question.
Yeah.
And so I have to choose between a couple options. And maybe good to know that somewhere last year, I wrote a series on LinkedIn. So a series of LinkedIn posts about wow moments in compliance. And these were just a couple moments that I lived through where I was really proud of what I was doing.
Cool.
So let me take one of these. So at a given moment, I was the head of compliance, and we discovered that there was a bit of a problematic situation in the country. So let's say we discovered some suspicious payments, let's say.
Okay.
So we conducted an investigation, which was a difficult investigation. In the end, I had to take over the investigation, and we fired a couple people. Some people just left because they understood where we were going. And we also lost a couple of clients, and we were really struggling with what to do next. And there was a new country manager, and I had a couple of conversations with the country manager and the rest of the management, and we came to the conclusion that we would just change the whole strategy. So and we would strive to become the most ethical company in our industry in this country.
Cool.
Yeah, but that was difficult because the organization was really upset. There was a notion like, so because I was pretty much involved in the investigation, so there was this notion like, okay, so don't talk with compliance because then you may get fired.
Okay.
and we had.
I think a lot of us have dealt with that, right?
So one thing I learned from that is I prefer not to do the investigations myself. But anyway, so on this occasion, I couldn't escape it.
Sure.
So we had to turn that whole notion around. And we said, okay, so actually, we invite you to come to us and talk with us. So if you face problems, talk with us. And let's see whether together we can find a solution. So
okay.
We at a given moment, we said, okay, so we are gonna hand out a general pardon. So if you know of something that you haven't told us yet, tell us now, and we won't take many measures against you. Just to make sure that you are honest.
Love it.
And we're also going to give you free legal advice. So we have a couple lawyers lined up for you, external lawyers, and you can get free legal advice and then come and talk to us. But if we're going to find out in a year from now that you have still been hiding things from us, then you're going to have to face the consequences.
Okay.
So and then slowly and surely we started to change the atmosphere around. So we tried to make compliance fun, and we approached it like a marketing campaign. And we started handing out prizes, and we had mugs and compliance parties, a compliance week, meeting with management, compliance prizes, dilemma sessions, and so on, town hall meetings.
Yeah.
And so at a given moment, 1 week, we decided to dedicate 1 to 2 hours every day to compliance.
Wow. It's a big dedication. I love that.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed. So we had a couple of difficult situations as well, where at a given moment, so even life-threatening situations, and I traveled to that country a lot. And I told them, so take me to those situations so I can see for myself what is going on there.
Wow.
And so we can together, we can try to find a solution. So that gave me a lot of credit, I think, because they saw that I was with them, and I was even prepared to take a risk myself.
Yeah, you're willing to be close to it.
Yeah.
That makes a big difference.
yeah, so it was about showing that you are in this together and trying to find solutions together. And and I really wanted to deeply understand those situations. And so we made quite a few changes. We lost clients, but we also gained other clients, and actually these were better clients, let's say.
Sure.
So yeah, and you know, and a year later, I was sitting together with the country manager again, and we were looking back in time, and we said, okay, so we sat here a year ago, and we know we knew we were wondering, okay, so where are we going to go with this company? Are we going to go broke? And we were prepared to suffer a loss. But when we looked at the financial results, we saw that we actually performed better than a year ago. And
Wow.
so this is something I'm still really proud of. And also when I left that company, this local CEO came back to me and said, well, to give me a big thank, and said, okay, so you really had a lasting impact on this local company. And so he thanked me again for being there, making this change, which we did together, of course. So you I did this together with the management.
Yeah.
And so, well, just the fact that I made an impact on this company, on the couple hundred employees that we had there. So I thought, okay, so this is exactly what I want to do with my life.
Right.
Yeah.
How encouraging is that? I love that story, Geert.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much stuff in there. I love the dedication that you and the company put into it. You said there's a problem here, and we're going to make a commitment. We're going to aim to be the most ethical company in this country, and you really, you really push for that, right? It was not just some words on a memo that was sent around. You spent time on it. You spent effort on it. You put yourself in danger to try to do it. And I think that, that really speaks volumes when there's a commitment like that. And it's not just a, hey, let's tweak it, try to be a little bit better, but we're going to upend a bunch of things to try to, kind of set the ship on the right course. I think that commitment was a big driver there, was it not?
Yeah, indeed. So, it's it was pretty challenging to turn the perception around, the
Right.
perception of how the compliance function was perceived. So I also have to say, one of the other things is that I hired a really good local resource. So somebody who understood both the local culture
Okay.
and the corporate policies.
Cool.
Yeah, yeah,
Another thing that I loved in that was just the way that you you were entrenched in it, right? This was not just writing a policy and send it around. You were doing the investigations. You were going on site. You were going to the dangerous site to see where it was, and you were really helping employees see an extension of that commitment is kind of putting yourself on the front lines, not just being in danger, but also having those conversations. A lot of this is relationship, and if it was just you're the only one in the company who cared about it, it would never happen. But when you can get that into the local manager, you can get that into the regional, country manager or whoever it is, and then they can start seeing, okay, I understand this vision. I understand how this is, this is strategic. It's not just, people telling me no and getting me in trouble, but this is going to be better for the company. Your and your broader team's full involvement in that went beyond, just kind of setting up a program, but actually enacting it. And I imagine that was a big part of that success.
yeah. Indeed. And then, you know, I at compliance conferences, I met a couple colleagues with a pretty similar stance. So also people who said, okay, so I'm going to go to Africa, and I'm going to sit in a truck next to my truck driver.
Okay.
And so let's see what happens when we face the border police. So
Okay.
let me just experience that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it becomes very real, right? It's not, when you do something like that, it goes beyond just prescribing what should be done, but you get a better sense of, well, what are the actual conflicts here, and how hard is it for someone to, we all kind of have the angel on the shoulder and the demon on the shoulder saying, hey, it's okay, take the bribe, no, you shouldn't do that, or whatever it is. Well, what are the actual conflicts happening there? How hard is it for someone to speak up, to do the right thing, to say no to something that's untoward? And I think that it's part of us as ethics experts driving this forward past kind of just efficient, like an efficient compliance program to an effective compliance program, is understanding those trade-offs and understanding kind of what someone's up against to really make it easy for them to do the right thing, not just make it clear what the right thing is.
Yeah, yeah. I think one of the most remarkable things is I used to go out to those countries and deliver face-to-face training, high-risk countries, and then at a given moment, sometimes people after the training they would come to me, and I would at first I would explain them like, okay, so bribery and corruption is bad. It has huge economic effects. Like, I'm an economist,
right?
and there are also big social and other consequences.
Right.
And then sometimes people would come to me and after the training and say, I have been paying bribes just to get along with my life. So this is something everybody does in my country.
Right.
So does that mean, do you now see me as a bad person? And I was like, yeah, good question.
Good question. Let me think about how to answer that.
Yeah. So that triggered a lot of interesting conversations. And in those, let's say, high-risk countries, it doesn't always help to say bribery and corruption is bad, but it's more like, okay, so do you think it should work like this? And
right.
Can we think of another way of how to make this possible?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because, I think that in those cases where you already have a protracted problem where it's beyond your company, listen, like it's one thing if everyone in the industry is doing things honestly and you're the only one committing fraud or bribing or something. It's very different when you're in an environment where, hey, like, from the time I was 4, I saw my parents giving bribes and we do this thing and this is how you kind of, grease the palm and stuff like that. It's a very different challenge to try to exist differently in a culture like that. Which, reminds me of, probably one of the most compelling parts about your story. I think it's so interesting how you stepped into this. I think it shows a lot of wisdom and it shows a lot of understanding of the social dynamics, how you and the team decided, hey, we're going to issue this general pardon. And I think, I think that the results speak for themselves, but I wonder how much of, like, how hard of a decision was that to say, hey, you know what, we're going to say it's okay. And we're going to kind of have a period where everyone can come clean. I think it makes a lot of sense to say, hey, let's kind of shift this into a new area. Let's air all the dirty laundry and then, try to clean it up. Was that a hard decision to make? And, were there parts about that where you wondered, hey, like, is it really okay to kind of write this off?
Yeah, so that was a difficult decision, especially if you also have to deal with some of the lawyers who are more like,
right.
Okay, so what?
Yeah, they're like, let's lock this guy up. Let's put all the liability on this person.
And I have to say that we said, okay, so if you know anything, if you heard anything, if you've seen anything in the past, let us know. And there's going to be a general pardon unless you have been, let's say, the big culprit yourself. Yeah. So, but indeed, so this was we had to do something to change that perception around that, and to invite people to talk to us instead of hide things from us.
Right.
So we wanted them not to be afraid to come and talk to us.
And
we had to come up with something drastic.
Yeah, that's a great word for it. It was drastic. It makes a lot of sense. The result that you were going for makes a lot of sense, right? You wanted people to tell you something. You wanted people to speak up. You wanted to you wanted to give people a chance to kind of get on the right side of the law, so to speak. But also, there's risk. You had the discussion, you had it out with the lawyers about, hey, are you really going to let this person go and stuff like that. But when you can find that out, right, this is probably not something you can do every 6 months, right? You don't want to keep doing it. But to get started, you can say, hey, okay, I know that there was an implicit or an explicit sense of our culture before that it was okay, right? Like we send some message when someone gets away with something, whether we authorize it or not, that like, okay, well, it's all right. It's like if you go 1 kilometer over the speed limit and don't get pulled over, you're like, okay, 1 is maybe fine, 20 is too much, right? They had gotten some signal that like maybe it was okay. And you could say, okay, that may or may not have been how it was. Here's how it is. We need to tighten it up. But it's a very bold and drastic move. Do did you have to fight you kind of talked about how you did a marketing campaign. Did you have to fight a communication battle about like whether you were actually serious about it? Do you think that some people were like, they're just trying to trick me?
Well, certainly, yeah, certainly in the beginning. So, but I think what pulled them over is that I showed that commitment. That's one other thing. So, in this situation, in this country, so almost everybody had done something bad, with a few exceptions. But some
Right.
of the things that happened were worse than others. So let's say, so you're also in a situation where you say, okay, so we cannot fire just everybody. So
yeah, it's true. Okay.
And apparently, when we had this culture here locally, how is it possible that we had not noticed that before? So we as a compliance department and also as management, we have also dropped the ball. So we are also partly to blame for what happened here. And so I think it's also important to recognize that, like, it's not entirely your fault. It's we also make mistakes. So one of the things I learned there, for example, is that you can do something like e-learning. E-learning is something that can be quite effective. It's relatively cheap, and you can with a relatively limited budget, you can train large number of people.
Yes.
But you will not be able to bridge a cultural gap with e-learning. So the remarkable thing was, in this country, I think we had a completion percentage of the compliance training of something like 98%, which was suspiciously high.
Yeah, suspiciously high. Yeah, sure.
So I think the first time I visited the country, I went there and I said, okay, so I'm going to provide a compliance training. And I know we have pretty good completion results of the online training. So I'm going to just quickly repeat the headlines, and then I'm going to dive into the details, and we're going to have a more detailed discussion.
Okay.
And so I was talking there for 5 minutes, and at a given moment, somebody raised his hand and said, "Well, Mr. Vermeulen, sir, are you serious about that thing that we can't pay bribes?" And I was like, okay, what kind of a question is that? So I said, yeah. And then let's say, so I thought, well, okay, so let's continue the training. And so something like 2 or 3 minutes later, I got the same question, and I thought, okay, so there's something is going on here.
Right.
So this training, I think it was probably one of the most weirdest trainings I've ever done.
Sounds like it.
So we had a conversation, and it turned out that the people understood the corporate policy. They understood what we wanted to see and hear, and they said, but we also we also assume that you understand the situation, the local situation over here.
Okay.
So
you got down to it.
So
yeah,
you
that's
the training. We
yeah.
know what the right answers are, but we're also assuming that that it just doesn't work like that over here.
Okay.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Yeah, but that's great clarity to get, right? I mean, I think everyone has some sense of that, of someone takes the training, they know about it, they say, okay, yeah, I should do that if I can, and it's easy enough, but I don't always do it, right? And then we need to try to bridge that. So what did you do from there?
Yeah, so that was the start of the investigation, let's say.
Exactly.
Well, not exactly the start. We had received a couple hints before that trading. That's why I actually traveled to the country. Yeah, though at the same time. So these stories are really good and exciting, and I'm happy that I was in the situation to really experience that. Huh? But I also have a lot of clients where life isn't always that exciting. Huh? So
Sure, sure.
yeah. There's one thing I also would like to add here. I was thinking
Please
something
do.
I was really proud of is so um, so I got involved in anti-corruption in 2007 when I worked at a company where the DOJ started asking a couple questions, and we started an anti-corruption investigation, and
Okay.
I coordinated the investigation in my region.
Hmm.
And together with the other regions and the head of compliance, we put in place a global anti-corruption program.
Oh, cool.
And the authorities recognized in several countries that we had put in place a best-in-class compliance program, and we got a huge reduction in our fine and so on. So and this for me was the start of let's say my entry into the speaker and teaching circuit. So I've
Okay.
been speaking and teaching for the last 10 years, because let's say 10 years ago people just wanted to know, like, okay, so a best-in-class corruption program, what does that look like?
Right. What is that? I can't imagine it.
Yeah. So and by the way, a lot has changed in the last 10 years, but I, so something I'm really proud of is that there were, while teaching and speaking, there have been at least two people that listened to me, um, somehow got inspired, and then went off to do great things that I later I thought, okay, wow, they are doing great things. I wished I would have done those things, but
Cool.
and and then they came back to me and said, well, actually, you were the guy who inspired me to do this. And I thought, okay, no, okay, this is something I'm really proud of. So
Yeah.
I also thought, so if I want to make a couple small changes in the world, so this is what I should do. Try to inspire people to do the right thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. You had talked earlier about wanting to solve world poverty, but
Yeah.
it feels like that type of thing where you can't be in every program, you can't run every investigation and stuff like that, but if you can empower and pour into some other people, inspire them to go on and do something, then you're part of that story. And I think that that's a great testament to the strength of your teaching and your training, and your expertise, that people, there's a certain level of, okay, I understand that. It's a very different level to say, okay, I'm going to take that, I'm going to integrate that into what I'm doing, and I'm going to go do something even bigger because of it. And that, that higher level is something that really makes a big difference in the world. That's really wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you.
So I'd love, thanks for that story. That was so rich. There was so much stuff to talk about in there. I really appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
I,
So yeah, you can go to the wow moments, go to my LinkedIn profile and look for wow moments in compliance, and
cool.
there are more stories.
Yeah, well, yeah, everyone should go check that out. You're a great contributor on LinkedIn, and you said that was in the past year that you did the wild moments, right?
About a year ago. Yeah.
Okay. So I'd love to get a little bit of your perspective, shifting gears a little bit. You talked about how e-learning is not going to make a cultural difference. You talked about how you and your team had, you had done compliance week and, town halls and marketing campaigns and all of that. How do you feel that the compliance team is uniquely positioned for, as compared to any other division in the organization, to drive empathy and a strong culture, across dividing lines of divisions?
Yeah. Yeah. So are we? So
Okay, yeah, let's talk about that.
so I think that we are, but this is something something already which is a little bit of a battle. So let's see. So you know, when I look at company scandals, or the let's say the challenges that I faced in the countries where the companies I worked for.
Yeah.
So I often found out that they are the result of either insufficient controls or problems with the culture or problems with the governance of the organization.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's two out of the three, and more often than not, it's all three of them. So
Yeah.
controls, culture, and governance.
Mm-hmm.
And so I definitely believe compliance has a role in influencing culture. And you know, the funny thing is that in the Netherlands, in the corporate governance code, the Netherlands where I live, in the
Yeah.
corporate governance code, it says that the management of the company has to ensure that there is a good company culture, a culture of integrity.
Okay.
And I think that we are uniquely positioned to help the management with that.
Yes.
Um, but so does HR.
Sure.
So I sometimes
Yeah,
sense
it takes a village, right? It's not going to be done by any one person.
so the management has to drive that change, but sometimes doesn't know how to do that. So somebody should help them. I think that should be us, the ethics and compliance people. But HR sometimes also thinks that they play a role there, and well, and they do.
Sure.
So I sometimes reach out to HR and say, okay, so let's do this together.
Mm-hmm.
But they are not always that welcoming. So sometimes they are like, okay, so go away. This is our piece of cake.
Ah, okay.
So
Yeah, that's
yeah,
interesting.
and then even when you get that role, like I have played that role once in a while in the past. It's still a bit of a struggle. So you know, I'm an economist by background, and I ended up between a whole lot of lawyers and in the compliance world, and all of a sudden I had to learn about psychology and behavioral insights and changing a culture, which is pretty difficult to do. And you know, I'm at a given moment, I also, as I realized, like, oh, okay, so, but I'm not alone in this. So other compliance officers are also struggling with this. And then I'm a very active member of the Dutch Compliance Officer Association. I'm also the former president. And we, at a given moment, we went to sit together with a group, and we call ourselves the expert group on culture and behavior.
Okay.
And we just started working on this. Like, okay, so we all face this challenge.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we, as compliance officer, how do we change a culture or improve a culture? And with our combined knowledge, so everybody just started writing things like, okay, so this is something that I did that worked out great. So I developed, so we started writing and developing tools that help ethics and compliance officers to change culture, to influence the culture of a company. So I also drafted a couple of those tools and then asked feedback from the group. And so together we got somewhere.
That's cool.
So, yeah. So something like 2 years ago, we published this toolbox. How we call it, a toolbox with some 40 tools now to influence culture and behavior.
Oh, cool.
Unfortunately, it's still only available in the Dutch language. So we have been gradually, you know, in the beginning we've been a little bit hesitant to give it to make a lot of noise about it, but we are now slowly coming back to that situation because you know it's our combined knowledge.
Yeah.
And some of us are in-house compliance officers, some of us are consultants.
Okay.
So let's say we see it as our intellectual property, the intellectual property of the group. Mm-hmm. And we wouldn't want let's say big firms to go out and sell what we have what we have invented. But we are slowly but surely getting back from that position, and we want to make it available to just every professional who is interested in that, and even outside of the compliance profession. So also we're making it available to accountants and fraud investigators.
Okay.
So the next step that we're going to do is we're going to make an English language version, and we're inviting people to also come up with tools and make suggestions for the ones that we drafted. So
that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the collaboration that you brought up. As we're talking about culture, you talked about it in two different ways. On one end, you talked about it, it's culture is not going to be changed just by the compliance and ethics department. You're going to collaborate with HR, and it's ultimately going to be pushed and impacted through management, right? So, it takes a village to get it done on that end. And then, with this cultural tools, this toolkit that you put together, it's not just one person thinking of their ideas. It's a bunch of people coming together and saying, hey, this worked for me. What if we do that a little bit differently? And ultimately, I can tell from our conversation, you want that to have a positive impact on the world, and you want people to be better off for it. And I understand, the desire to make sure no one's profiteering off of it and putting it behind a paywall and stuff like that. But you and that team of, I forget the name, the Dutch compliance superheroes or something. You had a problem. You guys all had seen this challenge, and you thought that coming together and collaborating for it would would benefit the world and allow employees to live in a more ethical environment. And I think that's ultimately what we're all trying to do, right? We're all trying to help make the world a better workplace. And I think it's really cool that you and that team got together and said, hey, let's collaborate, let's put our heads together and see what we can come up with.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
very cool.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up here, I'd love to get a little bit, get your crystal ball out and tell me where you think compliance is going. So, you've talked about, you've been, teaching for 10 years. I think you've been in compliance for 18 or 20 years. Over the next kind of 5 years, what are the most exciting or profound ways that you're interested in seeing compliance and ethics be different than maybe what it was 5 years ago? I kind of feel like nothing changes in a year, but kind of everything changes in 5 or 10 years.
Yeah. Great question. And I'm going to go back 5 years in time.
Yeah.
So,
I think we need to.
So some 5 or 6 years ago, I noticed when I was conducting third-party due diligence, and I've done a lot of third-party due diligence, and at that time I was doing third-party due diligence on our suppliers. More and more often, I run across the CSR department, and they were doing the same. They were also doing due diligence on suppliers, and so at a given moment, you can already guess. I said, okay, so let's work together on this. So also for the suppliers, it's pretty annoying that they have a discussion with the compliance team one day and with CSR people the other day, and we're also asking the same questions. So let's work together on this.
Sure.
And even though there is our position is slightly different. So sometimes, so let's say, I've come across CSR people who said like, okay, so this supplier is a little bit corrupt and they still have a little bit of forced labor, but you know what? We will put our arms around them and take them to a higher level. And I was like, okay, so from my point of view, I just can't afford that. If they are a little bit corrupt, we can't do business with them.
Yeah, just a little bit of forced labor, just a tiny bit.
So, but nevertheless, I try to cooperate with them, and a little bit later on, so we saw modern slavery laws popping up and human trafficking. So at a given moment, I was working at a company that was a supplier to the US government. And we had to deal with human trafficking conditions in our contracts. So I thought, okay, so this is probably going to be the next big compliance risk: modern slavery, human trafficking. But I was wrong. So this turned out to be anti-money laundering. Okay. So, but nevertheless, I see this field. I see it evolving, and I'm at this moment. I'm also chairing another expert group, an expert group in financial economic crime in the Netherlands. And this year we have discussed, for example, whether banks in their transaction monitoring can discover modern slavery risks. So can you see in your payment patterns, can you see indicators of there may be some modern slavery going on? And actually we can
Oh, wow.
do that. So there is the story with ABN AMRO Bank where they actually were able, together with the police, just looking at payment patterns to arrest um, 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 a couple criminals. So
Yeah.
and we've also discussed whether we can see whether we can spot illegal wildlife trade in payment patterns.
Cool.
And also when conducting customer due diligence, um, well, certainly in the Netherlands, we are more and more looking also into the environmental impact that our clients have. And we are nowadays in the Netherlands, we are obliged by law to report aggressive tax structures. So if our client has an aggressive tax structure, we have to report that to the authorities. So, I see this playing field, I see it broadening and broadening, and it almost looks like we are with the compliance department with this increased focus on customer due diligence, on third-party due diligence, on risks in the supply chain. It almost looks like we're moving closer and closer to the ESG function, so the CSR ESG function. And I don't think we have seen the end of that yet. So I think this is going to continue for the next 5 years.
Yeah.
And of course, with the things that I've said before, you will understand that this is something that I fully embrace. So
Yes, of course. Yeah. I mean, we want to see good things happen, right? We want to see people taken care of. We want people to be responsible to their environment, their community, and things like that. And yeah, I mean, that's another great collaboration that we as ethics experts can have, not just with HR, not just with managers, but also specifically in that ESG or CSR function. We had a show a couple months ago about the B Corp structure, which is meant to certify someone for, having essentially kind of a balanced ESG approach across their company internally to their employees through suppliers and things like that. And I think that's a great prediction. I will be excited to see it, and I think it's likely to continue to have fusion and collaboration between ethics and this, largely burgeoning and growing ESG and CSR function. That's great.
Yeah, and the other thing that I expect to happen is let's say if I look at the last 10 years, as I said, so I'm an economist. I had to learn about legal requirements. I started to learn about psychology and behavior. But I think that the next new development, what we are seeing is that we are going to hire data analysts.
Okay.
Like, for example, like I said, with the banks, that we are trying to detect payment patterns.
Sure.
So we need data analysts for that.
Mm-hmm.
I also learned from another US firm that they are also using data analysts just to see, okay, so to check whether our communications are being read and whether our compliance policies are being read. So and also I expect that we're going to see some AI specialists in the compliance profession.
Yeah, I think it's needed. The technology is getting closer and closer to being available and easier to use, where we can integrate it into our programs, and that really is a lot of the next frontier. Kind of using the data around us to complement the audits that we're doing, or the investigations, or the speak up culture and things like that. There's big data everywhere, and as ethics experts learn how to leverage that better, I think it's only going to make it easier for us to have a positive impact that we want to have.
Indeed. Yeah.
All right. Well, I want to give you a chance to tell people where to find you and where to get in touch with you. But Geert, this has been a really great chat. I really appreciate you sharing, some of your wild moments in compliance and some of your lessons that have brought you along this path from economist through to a compliance leader to a trainer, speaker, and consultant. I really appreciate you sharing your expertise with us today.
Thank you. And can I say one more thing?
Oh, please, whatever you like.
So I'm pretty excited to announce the launch of my new company next week. So a new company. I already established it 6 months ago, but at that time I thought it was just too early to launch it.
Okay.
But I'm launching a new company next week. So I encourage people to watch me on LinkedIn. You can also look me up at www.ethicscompliancemc.com.
Okay.
But I don't put a lot of effort in my website. So, but I'm pretty active on LinkedIn.
Yes.
So just go to my LinkedIn profile, Geert Vermeulen, and you will see probably next week, or let's say somewhere halfway December.
Okay.
I'm going to announce the launch of my new company called the Integrity Coordinator.
Oh, great.
Yes, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to offer my services as the external coordinator of whistleblowing procedures. So whistleblowing procedures is something that I've been coordinating for the last 12 years.
Okay.
I've handled a couple hundred cases, and I found it's really a very important element of an effective ethics and compliance program. So I think whistleblowing is really important, but I've also seen quite a few companies messing up.
Yeah. It's a challenge.
It's not rocket science, but you got to do it right. And you can easily mess up things. So it's I've been lucky. I should touch wood. All of the couple hundred cases that I've handled, I think nobody knows any of those cases. So and I like to keep it like that.
Yeah, exactly. So, run it smoothly.
If you are there early, you can solve the problem at an early stage before it becomes a big issue. And it's in the end, as you very well know, so also a positive speak up culture is also good in the end for the financial results of the company. So it's because it creates an open, transparent environment, and people start working together, collaborating, and they have creative ideas, and and it's good for your reputation. So, but the trigger for this is the new upcoming EU directive. The new that's
I think it's due by the end of next year. It's going to be fully in.
Yes, exactly. So on December 17, we are 1 year before the deadline.
Yeah.
And companies have to appoint somebody who is independent to coordinate the whistleblowing procedure. So that is something that I'm going to offer my services. So people can hire me as their independent coordinator of whistleblowing procedures.
That's great. I'm really excited for you, and I'm really excited to see you contribute your expertise in that specific way. It's something that's close to my heart. Whistleblowing, I think, is supremely important. To your point, it allows you to find out about something before it's in a lawsuit or in in an expose in the news or something like that. And that's really exciting. I'll keep an eye out for it, and I'm really excited to see you launch that. And anything else that you want to add before we wrap up?
No. So I think it was a pleasure to have this conversation. So thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's been great having you on the show. Thank you everyone for listening and watching today. This has been the Ethics Experts. I'm your host, Giovanni Gallo, and we've been proud to feature Geert Vermeulen about all things ethics experts. Everyone have a great day. Thanks for listening, and tune in next time.
Thank you.